Welcome to Stories and Stanza. I am your host Abhra. I am a poet and I created this podcast to bring you a montage of real stories that make life beautiful as poetry. Some stories are my own and some are from the wonderful people who have chosen to join me as guests and bring their incredible journey. Stories include a creator's passion or unfolding branches of human emotions in the face of failure, or unfamiliar chapters from the past that remind us about the richness and vastness of life. Embark on a voyage of exploration, contemplation, and motivation with me. Please join me in welcoming today's guest speaker. Hi, Arietta. Good morning and welcome to Stories and Stanza. How are you doing today?
Hi, thank you, Abhra. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm doing well this morning. I'm preparing for traveling next week, so everything's a little bit chaotic. But I'm very excited about my new book coming out, and I'm excited to be here speaking to you. How are you today?
I'm doing good, thank you. This section of my podcast is called In Author's Chair, and I invite writers to join and talk about a book they have recently published or they're working on. This podcast gives writers a platform to share and promote their work, as well as the audience a chance to get to know about the writer, their creative process, and the book they are working on. So, welcome to Author's Chair. And before we go ahead, tell us a little bit about yourself for the audience, please.
My name is Arietta. I am 30 years old and I come from Scotland, from a city called Dundee, but I now live in Zagreb, Croatia. I moved here to be with my husband, who's from Croatia, so I now live in Zagreb with my husband and my daughter.
That's wonderful. So, in today's episode, we will talk about your book and we will look into your journey of making that book happen. Before we get to that, tell us a little bit about your writing journey as to when you started, what inspired you, or was there any event that led you to write, and how you are going with it.
Actually, I've always been into writing. I think obsessed would probably be the right word. In primary school, from the age of maybe 4 or 5, I would spend my breaks inside on the computer whenever the teacher would let me, writing poems, which weren't very good because I was 5, or short stories. And then into high school, I was one of the first to sign up to a creative writing club that was set up, but it ended up being pretty much just myself and the girl who set up the club who turned up, so it did get cancelled by the school, but I showed up while it was there, and writing remained a hobby and a passion of mine for as long as I can remember. My mum had always said that I would write a book one day, so she's in the dedications of my book because she thought it would be a poetry book because I was always writing poems, but that's not so much my thing anymore. I prefer to write fiction, but it has always been something that I've loved to do, and I'm glad that I could make something out of that passion.
That is wonderful and inspiring to hear how you started and how you matured into your publication journey. So, what is this book called that we are going to talk about?
My book is called Whispers of the Unveiled. It was released or unveiled, so to speak, at the beginning of this week.
Tell us about the book and what theme it is based on, who the book is for. Just give us a general introduction about the book.
Of course. Imagine that the old pagan gods have been demonized, have been living among us secretly since then, surviving on our attention and our interactions in that way. But then they see that we're making the world uninhabitable for ourselves and therefore endangering them. And they have to stop living secretly among us and take some drastic action to just save us and therefore save themselves. And how we would cope in a world reclaimed by those primordial spiritual forces and nature. And that's what the book is all about. It's for anyone who enjoys fantasy. I think anyone familiar with Goetic mythology or demonology may get an extra buzz from it because they may recognize some of the names and the mythology throughout the book. But I've carefully woven in enough explanations of the mythos behind that I don't think you need to be pagan or even familiar with these entities and these names to enjoy it. I think you just need to be open-minded, because of course it does have pagan themes. There are LGBTQ plus major characters, and it speaks really explicitly about climate change and its consequences. So I think it's for people who are open-minded and open to thinking in a new way about those issues and those topics.
It's interesting how you have mixed both mythology and the real world challenges. In this interview, I always request the writers to read something from the book so it can give the listeners an idea. You can read the book blurb if you like, or you can read anything from a page or a paragraph of your choice.
Okay, so I'm going to read one page. This is where our main character, our narrator, discovers that he's stumbled upon something unexplainable. This is the down the rabbit hole moment, if you will. He was prepared for most things: magic lamps on a back shelf, dragons playing among the fabrics, maybe even a twin or replica of Ty, still in silk and beads, meditating in the space between the racks, levitating a few inches above the floor. From the anticlimactic to the downright absurd, his brain had already flooded with every possibility of what he might see through that gap, or so he thought. What he actually saw made him stumble back from the stall, a hand clasped over his mouth, biting the palm, partly to stifle any uncontrollable shouts or swears, but mostly to convince himself that he was in fact awake, and this was, at least to his knowledge, real life. He took another peek, just to make sure, and walked away with his ears ringing, threading through the crowd, now even more determined to find out where Ty was going. It took him too long to notice that his hands were shaking violently. He shoved them into the pockets of his trousers in an attempt at feigning nonchalance, though sure that he'd never achieve anything close again. He'd been prepared for almost anything when he looked behind that curtain, but nothing could have prepared him for nothing. All of the dresses, the suits, the scarves, gone. It was, for all intents and purposes, an empty space.
Thank you so much for reading from your book. I'm sure it will create an interest for like-minded readers. Can you tell us a little bit about how you came to pick this theme? And I'm assuming this is your first book.
Yes, it is my first fiction book, yes.
Congratulations for that. And could
Thank you.
tell us why did you choose this idea for your first book?
Yes, it's primarily set in New York. I got married in New York City last February, and while I was there, it's just such an amazing place and so different from anything I've ever seen. I knew I wanted to set a story there, but I was also struck by how artificial everything was in the city. It's all so huge and bright, and everything's plastic and concrete and neon. And I was just wondering what it looked like before. Was this space that's now just, as they call it, a concrete jungle, was it an actual jungle at one point? What would it look like reclaimed by nature with moss and vines all over these buildings one day? And how would it grind to a halt if there was suddenly some kind of tech outage? And yeah, that combined with inspiration from my own spiritual beliefs and spiritual practices led to the plot that we have now. It evolved from the concept of just a tech outage and nature reclaiming the one city to the world and taking in the spiritual aspects as well.
I understand. You told me that the book brings in the mythology as well as an awareness about what we are doing to environment and everything. So was there a hidden message that you wanted to convey as a writer? Was there a subtle theme to it?
Yes, it is a blend of ancient mythology and contemporary issues, and that's something that I'm very proud of with it. I think it does that very well. And those who have already read it in advanced copies and since the release have also said they really enjoy the balance between contemporary issues and kind of timeless entities and mythology. I wouldn't say it has a hidden message. If it is, it's very thinly veiled. We are making the planet uninhabitable for ourselves, and I hope that people will realize how far we've come from nature by reading the book and seeing how far-fetched and fantastical just the natural state of our world sounds. I think that's the overarching message of the book, and it's not preachy in any way, but I also wouldn't say that it's hidden because it's a very loud, very
Yes, no,
loud
I
message, I would say.
understand that.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Now, in the next section, I try to understand from the writer about their preparation for the book in general. What was the discipline? What were the challenges? What worked well? The first thing I would want to hear from you is how long did it take to write and how did you go through the editing process?
So it took just over a year to write in total, although that wasn't working day in, day out on the book. Working, doing something on the book every day was maybe the last 5 months, 6 months. But I had been working on it gradually for a year and a half. I have a day job, I have a full-time job. I've also been moving countries in the meantime, and I have a 10-year-old child. Not every moment of my day, unfortunately, could go to the book. I believe it would have been done much quicker if it had, but that's not how life works. And therefore it took a little bit longer than I would have hoped or expected. The editing process, I think if I did it over, I would have left the self-editing part until I was done writing it. That would have made the process quicker. I recommend not writing while you're editing. It's very easy to get stuck tinkering with one scene and not move on. So it's easier to edit a bad scene than it is to edit an empty page because you're stuck tinkering with one line. So I would recommend not editing until you're done with writing the body of the text itself. That would, as I said, in hindsight, that probably would have made the process quicker.
Yes, of course. And did it require any research work or any other kind of preparation when you got into it?
There was minimal research. As I said, I'm very familiar with the mythology and with the deities and so on that I've used in the book through my own spiritual beliefs and practices. There is nothing in there that I didn't already know, but I did had to check for accuracy. So I had to go back and check the books that I've read before and check on the internet just to make sure that I wasn't being disrespectful to any practices or using any entities from closed practices and things like that, because I wouldn't want to intrude on another culture by using, for example, any entities from the Haitian voodoo or anything of the sorts that are closed practice. So I had to check that I wasn't doing that, and also check that I was portraying these entities and their mythos accurately and correctly throughout the book. That was the main thing, taking notes on everyone that I wanted to write about to make sure that I was portraying them not only true to character, but weaving little hints about their mythology through there. So anyone who is familiar will pick up those Easter eggs, so to speak, in the language that's used or what they're wearing.
Those little suggestions that make the book all the way more interesting. You talked about your editing. Were there other challenges that you faced? Anything you could have done differently?
I think maybe just setting aside some time, because in the time since I decided to set aside some time every day to work on the book, it was much easier to get into the swing of writing it and keep writing it and get immersed in the story. So I probably would have either left it until now, like not now, when I started seriously writing it, because I had to go through and change a lot anyway after leaving it sitting for a few months with only doing maybe a line here and a line there in that time. I would perhaps wait until I had time to dedicate time to writing, or just make sure that I made the time and set aside maybe an hour even every day just to get something done on the book, because once you leave it for a few days, it's hard to get back to it, at least for me, when you've got a million other things to do. But really, the biggest challenge is getting the book out there and getting it seen after publication. The actual writing of the book was a piece of cake compared to marketing it, especially from, as I mentioned, I live in Croatia now. So when I'm doing social media pages like TikTok, for example, the algorithms are pushing out those videos in Croatia. Now there's a language barrier there, and also Amazon doesn't operate there. It's difficult to get. I put out a video yesterday and said, I'm trying to get off the Croatian algorithm. Please only interact with this if you're not in Croatia. Let me know where you are. Try to, and yeah, no one. I think it got about 20 views and no one actually interacted, because yeah, the algorithms are heavily pushing my content here, which it's in a country that can't actually buy the book. So that is a huge challenge at the moment. And if I'd known that in hindsight, I would have somehow, I'm not sure how, if I knew how, I'd be doing it now. So I would have been going through this before publication, figuring out how to actually get it seen, because people can't read a book that they don't know exists.
Did you try other social media like maybe Instagram or Threads?
Yes, I've been on Threads. I've been interacting with kind of the
Threads
writer
has
and
a
reader
good
community.
following for writers.
Yes, I've noticed that. I'm going to keep trying with Threads because I've got more interaction and more attention on there than I have anywhere else. I've tried Facebook and TikTok and Instagram, and it doesn't seem to get
Because what
anywhere.
I've seen is Facebook and Instagram is a lot of saturated. If you like to get something noticed in Instagram, you have to tag it heavily, and like there are 30 tags or so that you can put, and you have to add those tags into,
Actually,
yeah.
social media and marketing is actually part of my day job, and we get updates from the social media sites. And my manager came to me just a few days ago and said, just a heads up, bin the hashtags on the Instagram posts for the company, because the head of Meta has actually said they don't do anything anymore. It's, yeah. it's difficult because the algorithms all seem to be working more in line with location. So where the account was set up, and that is a massive challenge. Threads, however, doesn't seem to be doing that, which is strange because it's run through Instagram. But Threads, you can use one hashtag and that works. I think it's the same with Instagram now, to be honest. You can, the first hashtag you use, it'll go out. But I think people ruined it by saturating everything with a million hashtags. So now they've limited it to only one being effective, and actually on Threads you can only use one. Yes. So I am on Threads. Yes.
Right. I will try to promote you in my network. And again, when the episode comes out, I hope that it gives audience a little bit more closer to the writer, and they get to know about your processes and challenges, and then they might be more interested in your book. Tell us about your publishing experience. Are you traditionally published or self-published, and what was the reason for your preference?
So I am self-published. That was actually my preference. I spoke with my husband about it, and I toyed with the idea of sending the manuscript out to traditional publishers. But ultimately, with self-publishing, you have more rights and you can receive more of the royalties from the book in that way. So I chose to self-publish. However, I think with the next book, which is already in the works, I already was sitting at 2 a.m. last night annoying my husband with the plot of the next book. And with that, I think I may look into traditional publishing purely because, as I've said, the biggest challenge that I'm facing is actually getting the book seen, that people know it exists. Now, with traditional publishing, often the publisher will handle that for you because they want to make money, of course. So they're going to push out the book that they've published. They're going to promote it, and they have a lot more money than I do to do that. Essentially, they can they have thousands to throw at marketing for a book. I sadly do not. So I would look into traditional publishing purely because, yes, I may only get what 20%, 30% royalties off the book, but I'm probably going to sell more copies, and it's not about money for me. It's about how many people are actually seeing my story. Of course, I'd like to break even on the editing costs and cover costs, cover design costs and everything. But I'm not looking to be a millionaire. I think that the story is something great and I'd like people to read it. And I said that I got a bit disheartened when there was no interest from some close friends and family members. And I said to my husband, it's nothing to do with the money. I would be happy if they messaged me and asked for one for free, and please don't encourage people to do that. I can't afford to send everyone one. But I said I'd be happy if people I knew asked for one for free, because it would show that they're willing and interested in reading the story, and it would get the story out there. And that's what I want. I want the story to get the recognition that I believe it deserves. Not me as a publisher, not my bank account, but Whispers of the Unveiled. I'd like it to be out there and visible. And I know that would be easier with traditional publishing. So that is something that I'll look into next time.
What I have done for my books is I approached the libraries here in Melbourne, and I asked them if they would catalog my book, and which they did. It gave the book a little bit more boost as to where it reaches. And if you like approach the libraries all over the world. Like you approach New York Library and approach British Library and things like
There is
that.
actually a scene in the book that's set in a library in New York, so I could message all of the libraries in New York City and pretend it's them, even though it's a completely fictional library, and maybe they'll stock it.
If it's a public library and you reach out to them, they might be able to catalog your book. That would give the book a little bit more reach to audience. I found it really great. Like my book is in a couple of libraries, so I think that could be one of
I think
the.
that would be great. I think I could die happy if I woke up one day to an email saying that it's. I think I'd have to go to that library, even if it was in New York or something. I would have to go out there and actually see it on the shelf. I'd be checking to see how many people had checked it out. But yeah, that would be great. That would be a dream come true to see it on a shelf somewhere in a library or a bookshop. So I will certainly start that outreach while I'm on holiday from work.
Yes, and another thing I can suggest is that you can print a few books yourself and then direct sell them from yourself. If you promote something in social media and you say that, okay, I'll be signing this book and I'll maybe write a note with it or something like that, and then post it yourself, that might be another avenue. I've seen authors doing that, if that helps.
Again, it is difficult because of location, getting my hands on the physical copies, and then the cost of actually shipping that out back to the UK is astronomical, especially after Brexit. Yeah, that's a little bit
I
difficult.
hear it. These are
Yeah.
very real challenges, and I hope that it gets the platform it needs and it gets listened to. And yeah, I think we are close to the time limit for our interview. And before we end, would you like to say anything to your readers?
Yes, I hope that all of you out there who decide to give this book a chance enjoy it. I have had a few testimonials already, as I said. If I have time, I'll just read out what someone has said about the book already. So the first person to read the book in its entirety in advance of the release has said, I found myself virtually incapable of putting this book down, giddy with each oncoming chapter, and absolutely annoyed anytime I was made to take care of stuff around the house instead. I can't tell you how much I look forward to reading this author's future endeavors and seeing how she can get even better than she is now as a writer, because I genuinely don't know what that could look like, and that excites me. I hope she recognizes that this is more than just a talent she has. This is a calling, and one I hope she never stops listening to anytime soon. And I thought that was lovely. And I'd love to hear more people's thoughts on the book, even if it's not positive, even if it's if it's just someone wanting to shout at me about how they didn't like a character or something. I wrote a few characters that I didn't like, and they're not supposed to be liked. Whatever it is that you want to send me, I'm open. I love receiving messages about the book. And if anyone has any questions about the book or would like to access to a preview if they're not sure if they want to go ahead and buy just yet, I'm happy to send that over. My name will be, I assume, somewhere in the title or the blurb of this podcast.
We'll have an author bio and the links to
Yeah,
the book and all. So you'll have all the details
perfect.
for listeners to find you and find your book.
Okay. You can find me then on social media, and I'm happy to take any questions or comments. But overall, I hope that you are open to giving this book a chance, and I hope you love reading it as much as I loved writing it, because it is my proudest accomplishment to date, and I'm so excited to be sharing it with the world.
Thank you so much for coming to Stories and Stanza and sharing your journey with this book and about the book. Best wishes from my side.
Thank you for having me. It was great talking to you and glad to be here.
That's all.